In a bustling airport terminal, a young woman handed over her ID, met with smirks and muffled laughter, until the scanner flashed a glowing emblem, silencing the room and revealing a truth no one expected. Lila Carter stood at the security checkpoint of a busy international airport, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her expression calm but tired. It was just past 6 a.m., and the line had been long, filled with travelers shuffling through the early morning haze. Lila, in her early 30s, wore a plain gray hoodie and jeans, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun. She didn't stand out, blending in with the crowd of weary passengers. But there was something about her quiet confidence, the way she moved with purpose, that hinted at more than met the eye. The security officer, a middle-aged man with a bored expression, took her ID without a word. He scanned it, his eyes flicking to the screen. Then, unexpectedly, he chuckled. It was a low, almost mocking sound that caught the attention of the officer next to him. "Hey, check this out," he said, nudging his colleague. The second officer leaned over, glanced at the screen, and let out a snort. "No way," he muttered, shaking his head. Lila stood there, her face impassive, though her fingers tightened slightly around the strap of her backpack. "What's so funny?" she asked, her voice steady but edged with curiosity. The first officer looked up, his smirk still in place. "This ID. You really expect us to believe this?" He held up the card, a standard government-issued ID with her photo, name, and a few other details. But there was something else on it, an emblem, subtle but distinct, etched in the corner. The officers didn't seem to notice it at first, too caught up in whatever they found amusing. Lila tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Is there a problem with my ID?" she asked, her tone polite but firm. The second officer laughed outright this time, loud enough to draw glances from nearby travelers. "Problem? Nah, it's just come on, lady. This looks like something you printed at home. What's with the fancy title? You some kind of secret agent or something?" He was joking, but his words carried a sting, a dismissal that assumed Lila was nobody special. She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to a calm, measured cadence. "Scan it again," she said. The first officer raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed, but he humored her. He ran the ID through the scanner once more, expecting the same result. But this time, the screen flickered, and a soft chime sounded. The emblem on the ID, a stylized eagle intertwined with a crescent, lit up, glowing faintly in the dim light of the checkpoint. The scanner's display flashed, and a new window appeared, one that neither officer had seen before. The laughter stopped. The first officer's smirk faded, his eyes widening as he stared at the screen. The second officer leaned in, his jaw going slack. "What the?" he muttered, his voice trailing off. The screen displayed a classified clearance level, a string of codes, and a directive that read, in bold letters, "Immediate access granted. Contact supervisor." The emblem pulsed once more before fading, but the message on the screen remained, unyielding. Lila stood quietly, her expression unchanged, as the officers exchanged a glance. The first one cleared his throat, suddenly formal. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside for a moment. We need to verify this." His tone was no longer mocking. It was cautious, almost nervous. Lila nodded, her movements deliberate as she stepped to the side, her backpack still slung over her shoulder. The travelers behind her whispered, sensing something unusual but not quite understanding what was happening. A supervisor, a woman in her 40s with a no-nonsense demeanor, arrived quickly, alerted by the officer's urgent call. She took one look at the screen, then at Lila's ID, and her expression shifted from professional curiosity to something bordering on respect. "Miss Carter," she said, her voice low but clear. "Please come with me. We'll process you through a private channel." Lila followed without protest, her steps measured, her face betraying nothing. The officers watched her go, their earlier amusement replaced by a mix of confusion and unease. The supervisor led Lila to a small office just beyond the checkpoint, where a secure terminal was already humming. She scanned the ID again, this time on a different system, one reserved for high-priority cases. The emblem glowed once more, and the screen filled with information, most of it redacted, but enough to confirm that Lila Carter was no ordinary traveler. The supervisor sat back, her eyes meeting Lila's. "I apologize for the delay, Miss Carter. You're cleared to proceed. We'll escort you to your gate." Her tone was professional, but there was a hint of curiosity, as if she wanted to ask more but knew better. Lila simply nodded, offering a small, polite smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice as calm as ever. As they walked through the terminal, the supervisor couldn't help herself. "If you don't mind me asking," she said, keeping her voice low, "what exactly do you do? That clearance level, it's not something we see every day." Lila's smile widened slightly, but she didn't answer directly. "I help solve problems," she said simply, her words vague but carrying a weight that silenced further questions. The truth was, Lila Carter was a problem solver of a very particular kind. For years, she'd worked in the shadows, her name known only to a select few in the highest echelons of government. Her ID, unassuming at first glance, carried a clearance level tied to an agency that didn't officially exist. The emblem, a symbol of her authority, was a rare marker, one that granted her access to places and information most people couldn't even imagine. She wasn't a spy, not in the Hollywood sense, but her work involved navigating complex situations, diplomatic, strategic, sometimes dangerous, that required a sharp mind and an unshakable resolve. Lila had grown up in a small town, the daughter of a teacher and a mechanic, with no hint of the path she'd eventually take. She'd excelled in school, particularly in languages and analytics, which caught the attention of a recruiter during her college years. That encounter had led to a series of tests, interviews, and eventually a job offer that changed her life. She'd been trained to blend in, to observe, to act when necessary, and to leave no trace. Her work took her across the globe, from tense negotiations in foreign capitals to quiet operations in unassuming places like this airport. She was good at what she did, too good, sometimes, which was why her ID carried that emblem. Back at the checkpoint, the two officers were still processing what had happened. The first one, whose name tag read Mark, shook his head as he resumed scanning IDs. "Never seen anything like that," he said to his colleague, a younger man named Ryan. "You think she's some kind of, I don't know, undercover operative?" Ryan shrugged, still staring at the now blank scanner screen. "Whatever she is, that emblem wasn't fake. Did you see the supervisor's face? She looked like she'd just seen a ghost." Mark nodded, his mind replaying the moment the emblem lit up. "Yeah, well, I'm not laughing at anyone's ID again. Lesson learned." Meanwhile, Lila reached her gate, her escort discreetly peeling away as she blended back into the crowd. She boarded her flight without incident, her backpack stowed overhead, her demeanor as unremarkable as ever. But the passengers around her, oblivious to the scene at the checkpoint, would never know that the woman in the gray hoodie was someone who could walk into rooms where world-altering decisions were made, someone whose quiet presence carried the weight of secrets few could comprehend. Her destination was a city halfway across the world, where a delicate situation awaited her expertise. She didn't think about the officers or their laughter, didn't dwell on the moment the emblem had changed everything. It was just another day, another checkpoint, another step in a life that thrived on discretion. But for those who'd witnessed it, the officers, the supervisor, even the travelers who'd caught a glimpse of the tension, the story of Lila Carter and her glowing emblem would linger, a reminder that appearances could be deceiving and that some IDs held power beyond imagination. As the plane took off, Lila glanced out the window, her mind already shifting to the task ahead. The world below grew smaller, the airport fading into the distance, but the impact of that moment at the checkpoint rippled outward. The officers would tell the story to their colleagues, who'd tell others, until it became a quiet legend in the airport's break room, a tale of a woman whose ID stopped everyone in their tracks, and an emblem that glowed with authority no one could question. Lila, unaware of the whispers she'd left behind, settled into her seat, her thoughts focused on the mission. She was used to moving through the world unnoticed, her true role hidden behind a plain ID and a quiet demeanor. But every now and then, when the emblem lit up, the world paused, and for a fleeting moment, the truth of who she was shone through.